Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We'd like to thank Gulfstream Park for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB throughout the championship meet. The Gulfstream Park Championship meet runs now through the early April Florida Derby weekend, featuring high-quality racing throughout. Once again, we'd like to thank Gulfstream Park for their sponsorship. Good morning. Welcome to Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. I am Seth Merrow. Thanks for joining us. As usual on a Sunday, a recap of some of the stakes action. I said it yesterday, we were more racing around the globe than racing across America as we featured the Saudi Cup card throughout the morning yesterday here on the network and talked about the races with Dick Powell. Dick had done the morning line for Saudi, so we'll have some, as we normally do, stakes recaps from right here stateside yesterday. A great day at Oaklawn, and we'll talk about that. But also, we'll take a look at some of that Saudi action, just because the second place finishers were kind of the more interesting, maybe for those of us over here. It was a little bit frustrating in some of the races, although others, the Americans did okay. And so we'll look at some of those races. We'll pull up a couple of stakes from Aqueduct yesterday, the Gulfstream Park Sprint, and then we'll save for a little later Oaklawn, because we'll be joined by my summertime colleague, loose on the lead up at Saratoga. Steve Byk is on his kind of annual early season racetrack radio road trip, taking a Sirius and XM radio show on the road. We had him a few weeks ago. I believe we had him from Gulfstream, but he went from Gulfstream to Tampa. I'm trying to think whether we had him Gulfstream or Tampa, but he was Gulfstream, Tampa. Last weekend, he was down at the fairgrounds. Yesterday at Oaklawn, and so we'll get a little Oaklawn recap from him. And I think next up, I think he's headed out to Santa Anita, and then made the annual stop at Vegas for the NHC, which is always a lot of fun. We miss getting out there and doing TV out there, but we can live vicariously listening to the Byk radio coverage of the and I've said a million times, I told him I said, a radio show at a handicapping contest, is that going to work? And it's a lot of fun, because you get all the biggest players in the country and the best players, and Paul and Duke Matisse and Rich Averill, and just the list goes on of names you're familiar with who aren't just prominent in the game in a handicapping way, but an ownership way, and not just an ownership way, but a handicap. And there, some trainers show up at the NHC every year, and you know, Steve manages to pull a lot of those people over, and it's fun as you get into the Sunday and things whittle down, and you get to the final table. You can have some fun listening to the radio show there. So envious that he's headed out there in a couple of weeks, but we'll have him this morning to talk about. I'm also envious. He was at Oaklawn yesterday. Really nice track. I've said it before. I will say it again. If you are checking racetracks off your list, plug Oaklawn in. It's a lot of fun. The town of Hot Springs and the relationship to the racetrack is very similar to Saratoga. Saratoga Springs, Hot Springs, they both grew up around Spa Springs, and early days they had some shady characters and casinos and whatnot, and the racetrack became a prominent part of the culture of both of the towns. And as I say, the town embraces Hot Springs in a similar way to Saratoga embracing their racetrack, and it's a lot of fun. But yesterday, a nice day. Weather didn't cooperate, but still some nice racing yesterday. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we pull in Steve Byk. But for now, let's take a look at some of that Saudi action from yesterday. And we'll kick it off taking a look at the Saudi Cup. And as I say, the second place finishers were maybe the more intriguing to those of us over here in some of the races. And this was one of them, as Panthalassa is going to get it done here late over Country Grammar. Country Grammar and Taba were over there for Bob Baffert. Frankie Dettori was on Country Grammar, and he's leading, and Panthalassa is going to come up and just keep grinding and grinding and eventually get by. It looks like Country Grammar is going to manage to kind of gut it out. But Panthalassa comes, and it looks like Country Grammar is going to get it, and Panthalassa guts it out the opposite way of as I was describing, because Panthalassa was there on the rail. Again, it was a little bit disappointing for Country Grammar and Bob Baffert, Frankie Dettori on board. Just coming up short, the margin, 3/4 of a length. Cafe Faro, I believe, was favored, ran third in there. The disappointment, obviously, was Taba. I think there were some high expectations. Taba winds up 8th under Mike Smith and didn't have much of a trip. But Country Grammar comes up short. And again, we will see some American runners in the next couple we'll look at as well that it just frustratingly couldn't quite get it done. But Panthalassa completes a really nice day for the Japanese, and overall in this $20 million Saudi Cup, they pulled down a lot of the purse money, as Japan has 4 of the top 5. Only Country Grammar spoiled that. It was a front-running score from Panthalassa. The interesting thing about Panthalassa, this was only the second dirt try of the career. This is much more of a turf horse. And in fact, last year, relatively about this time, dead heated in the Dubai turf. And so $20 million up for grabs. Japan, and the way their horses have been running globally over the past year and a half, couple of years, why not take a shot with our turf horse and go over? Gets kind of an easy lead and lopes along on the lead. And as I say, on the outside, Country Grammar came and seemed like to have the momentum to maybe make it interesting at the end. But again, winds up about 3/4 of a length short there. But again, Japan, a big day for them, but a big race as well, with 4 of the top 5 in the Saudi Cup. Just before that, it was the turf sprint. Actually, the dirt sprint was just before, and that's what we'll go to. The dirt sprint was the race just prior to the Saudi Cup. And we had a couple, Americans had a couple over there, intriguing entrants. Elite Power, who won the Breeders' Cup Sprint in the most recent start. That was last November in Keeneland. But Bill Mott sends that one over, puts Frankie Dettori on board. I liked Gunite, had Dick Powell on yesterday. He thought Gunite was interesting as well. Gunite, Steve Asmussen, and Tyler Gaffleone. And as they come down the lane, Elite Power, yikes. This is some performance. Frankie Dettori on board. Elite Power just goes, and in the lead there on the inside, that's Gunite. Nice race from Gunite. Winds up second in here. But Frankie Dettori getting it done on Elite Power for Bill Mott. The chart margin will wind up to be 3 1/4. And again, that's Gunite running second. Remake from Japan runs third. So, you would think American racing being what it is, dirt sprint, we send over a couple of runners, and very nice performance from our Breeders' Cup Sprint winner from last season, Elite Power in the seasonal debut. Marcus Hirsch in the Daily Racing Form had an interesting take as well. If you look at the PPs and you go down, yesterday Elite Power was ridden by Frankie Dettori. The prior start, the Breeders' Cup Sprint, was ridden by Irod Ortiz. Before that, Jose Lescano, then Joel Rosario. Then there were a couple with James Graham, a couple more with Rosario, and Garcia rode September of 2021 at the bottom of the PPs I'm looking at. And Marcus Hirsch had kind of an interesting take with Elite Power now winning the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and then going over and winning that race to start the season. Perhaps the best sprinter in the world, so it's a little bit strange he doesn't have a regular rider, which is a great point. You go down the page and he's bouncing around with the riders in what you would think after yesterday you could legitimately say the best sprinter in the world. But it was a nice performance from Elite Power. A nice day for Bill Mott overall, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along here. Let's go back to the sixth race yesterday. Just the prior to that dirt sprint was the Saudi Derby, having a meltdown again. It was an interesting day for the Americans, coming up just a little bit short. It's going to happen again in the Saudi Derby, having a meltdown. Again, Frankie Dettori on board for Bob Baffert. Having a meltdown, had come into this race with a record of 4 wins in 5 starts. And you can see, dueling here down the stretch with Commissioner King. Commissioner King really lightly raced, based over there in Saudi Arabia, and in 3 starts had a couple of wins. Commissioner King's the number 7 on the outside, and it looks like having a meltdown is just going to hold him off as Commissioner King hangs a little bit, but having a meltdown comes up a little short here. Chart margin winds up to be ahead, and it is a hometown horse there getting it done. As I say, very lightly raced. Commissioner King only 3 starts under the belt. Having a meltdown, as I say, came in 4 wins in 5 starts, including the San Vicente in the most recent start. The lone loss was a second place finish in the Del Mar Futurity behind Cave Rock. So having a meltdown, legitimate. They sent him over there. They took a shot at the $1.5 million and just came up short. As I say, it was a day where that kind of thing was. And the next race we'll look at, for me, was really a brutal beat. But having a meltdown, just caught late after leading most of the way in that Saudi Derby. And let's go just a couple of races earlier, and we'll look at the turf sprint. And as I say, this one for me was just a brutal beat. Because we're certainly friendly with Lee Einsiedler. We've had him on the show up in Saratoga. See Lee all the time and chat with him up at Saratoga over on the front side. And Casa Creed, who last year tried this race and wound up just a frustrating second. But boy, yesterday, Casa Creed just comes like a bat outta and just comes up short. Those are Lee's colors on the outside, sitting, about 5th, maybe? The pink colors on the outside. And you can see he has the momentum here. Bethrat Leon, Japanese runner, is on the front end. And Casa Creed just seems to have the momentum. And you think, oh, he's going to get, and then hangs just a touch maybe, and then kind of gets going again. And you think, get there, now you're not so sure. And then they get to the wire, and it's, oh. And there, I wasn't sure. When I watched it live, I thought, boy, that's a head bob. They do a little super slow-mo on the line, and when they pop that super slow-mo up, you can, yeah, there it is. Thanks, guys. You can tell on the shot. This is a great shot, by the way. I've said for years, every track should have one of these slow-mo cameras on the line, but you can see there, just came up. The margin on my chart here says ahead, but I would put that more as a short nose. So Casa Creed going out for Bill Mott. Luis Saez on board, who on Friday night our time, had won the International Jockey Challenge over there. Luis Saez gets it done to win that Jockey Challenge, and then comes back in and just comes up short there. But again, Bill Mott, Elite Power, that close-up second here in the turf sprint with Casa Creed. Those are nice performances, certainly. And we'll see, he capped the day over here stateside in nice fashion as well. So it was, again, fun day watching. Hopefully you were, we opened our doors here early at the Clubhouse Racebook for the Saudi Cup. We had a nice crowd in here, complimentary breakfast while supplies last. And the donuts went fast, but people were out there enjoying Saudi Cup action. And hopefully you, if you didn't come down here, we're at least watching during the morning as we plugged in the races live and maybe picked up a little something here or there. But it was fun to watch with some American entrants that some ran well. Again, Taba was a little bit disappointing perhaps, but boy, Casa Creed and Elite Power looked very good. So it was, as I say, a fun day around the globe over in Saudi Arabia yesterday. But over here in the United States, we also had some action worth paying attention to, including kicking things off with our recap of some of the stateside action. We'll take a look at the gander yesterday from Aqueduct, and this is going to wind up in a DQ. The winner, the first under the wire, was Maker's Candy, the number 4 horse. Number 5 Neural Network runs second. And you can kind of get the sense in the pan shot, that's the Klarovich colors coming up on the outside. And you can see the first horse under the wire, you can tell comes out. And when you watch the head on, you can see comes out a number of paths and kind of does stymie a little bit the Klarovich runner. So the stewards looked, and there was a subsequent disqualification, a flip-flop of the top 2. Neural Network winds up to be the winner for Chad and Klarovich, and Maker's Candy winds up second in there. Gomez was on board. There you go. There's the, you can see that the horse kind of coming out, and obviously impeding the progress of the horse who eventually was named the winner. Gomez, who was on the horse, Maker's Candy, first under the wire, said he was doing what he could to correct, and he didn't think it deserved a DQ. To me, that, the herding thing, you just never know how they're going to decide, but you're taking away the forward momentum. When the horse is going sideways, they're not going forward. Franco, on the other hand, was on board. The eventual winner, Neural Network, said, I was going by. If we didn't get stopped, I was going by. Also, yesterday, only 3 starts for Neural Network. Had won the debut back in November. And again, it's Chad and Klarovich, so winning a career debut, not unusual for that team. But then they got ambitious and went into Jerome, wound up 4th in there. And out of that performance, Chad Brown decided to put the blinkers on. And Manny Franco yesterday commented that he thought the blinkers did help. So you can keep that in mind going forward. Now, a relatively lightly raced 3-year-old, New York bred 3-year-old, showing some talent for a potent team. Neural Network, one to keep our eyes on. That said, Maker's Candy, certainly a very nice and talented 3-year-old as well. They both came in with a couple of starts, and they both acquitted themselves nicely. Unfortunately, Maker's Candy just couldn't hold the straight line there yesterday. But again, it was a nice performance from certainly the winner, but the horse that came under the wire first and was DQ'd also ran well. All right, let's take a look. Also yesterday at the Stymie, 8th race on the card yesterday. I took a little shot with Miles D. Miles D had shown some real ability for Peter Brandt and company, Chad Brown, early in the career. Had won the 2nd career start, and then going back to 2021, had run 2nd in the Curlin. Off of that, and only the 4th career start, they said, let's try the Travers. Ran 3rd behind Essential Quality with a triple-digit buyer. Subsequently, later in that 3-year-old season, won an allowance race and then a triple-digit buyer to win the Discovery. Came back at the beginning of last year in February at Fairgrounds in the Mine Shaft and ran 3rd behind Olympiad, and then was off from February 22 until January of this year, and came back with a complete dud. Went off as the 9-5 favorite and just did not fire at all. I was willing to kind of, you just don't know, has the horse gone in the wrong direction, or do we want to give that horse one? And that's what I was willing to say. This horse had shown a little too much talent early in the career to kind of give up. So I used Miles D. Miles D is going to be the number 6 horse here. Runs well, not as well though as Repo Rocks, who I had right underneath. And I said yesterday, this is going to be an interesting look at Repo Rocks, the number 3 horse, who in the last start, the Toboggan on January 28th, had won easily with a 111 buyer. That was the 3rd start after changing trainers to Jamie Ness, obviously a career best buyer, and by a long shot. It was just like an eye-popping performance and number in the Toboggan. So what was he going to do yesterday? I was willing to put Miles D on top, and I always say, hard to make a decision, one race good or bad on a horse. So I wasn't going to throw Repo Rocks out, but I was willing to take a shot against. But he ran well. I don't know if he quite validated the 111 last time. I'll be interested to see if the buyer people now taking a second look at that. Ran well. The chart margin winds up to be 3 1/4, but the buyer comes back to a more palatable, as compared to some previous efforts, 97. So the buyer came back 14 points. Again, nice victory, ran well, certainly validated the win last time and the performance, but the number, as I say, came back to a more, when you look at the page, more reasonable type of number. Trainer Jamie Ness said after the race that perhaps they will look at trying Grade 1 company next time in the Carter, going 7 furlongs. That is on April 8th. We'll see if Repo Rocks shows up there and how well he does against Grade 1 company after, again, having relatively recently in his career changed barns and showing up as obviously an improved performer. All right, and again, I alluded to it a few minutes ago, but it was a nice day for Bill Mott overall with the performances. Elite Power, big win in Saudi. Cat Casa Creed, that had to be disappointing. Just misses running second. But then Bill Mott down at Gulfstream and enjoyed a little bit later in the day Gulfstream Park Sprint. Candyman Rocket, another one of those horses that early on in the 3-year-old season had shown a little bit of ability, had won the Sam Davis. Then they tried the Tampa Bay Derby. That was a little bit of a flop. The Wood Memorial, the same. Then they went in a little stake to kind of wind up the 3-year-old season in May of that year and wound up second, but laid off until February of last year. The comebacker was okay, but then laid off until January of this year. So clearly there were some issues, but the comebacker in January was very good. Nice win. So betting public thought, yeah, we'll land on this one again. They did at 7-5, and Candyman Rocket, who I also had on top, lives up to the billing. Candyman Rocket, the number 7 here. Chart margin is going to be a couple of lengths. So again, nice win there. Bill Mott having a very, very nice Saturday. And he came out of this and told Mike Welch of the Racing Forum that they have no idea what the plans are next for Candyman Rocket. Just going to kind of bring him back to the barn and see. He did say, yeah, it won't be a year until you see him next, alluding to the layoff he had coming into this season. But now a couple of nice wins to start the 5-year-old season for Candyman Rocket. So nice, talented little sprinter. Again, they had stretched out to win the Sam Davis. So I guess it'd be interesting to see what they do. But you would think it looks like maybe a sprint side of a career for Candyman Rocket going forward. But again, nice day for Bill Mott overall. All right, we'll take a break. We'll take a break, and I'll come back, maybe hit on some news and notes, or maybe toss out some handicapping ideas before we connect with Steve Byk towards the bottom of the hour. So we will step away, but return shortly for Racing Across America on this Sunday morning. Stay tuned.
This is a championship meet. All the best jockeys in the world are here, and I'm excited to ride against them. And you get to watch some really incredible, talented athletes out there.
To us, it's a place to be in the winter.
I love Gulfstream Park because of the racing.
The palm trees, the beach is right here. The horse racing is some of the best in the country.
Capital OTB is now streaming live on Roku. The RTN Racing channel on Roku lets you watch OTB TV live through your Roku device or your Amazon Fire Stick, rather than being limited to computers and mobile devices, which means you can now watch OTB live wherever you are. Simply open Roku, scroll to find the RTN channel, then click on OTB TV. OTB TV on Roku. Try it now.
No matter where in the world you are, the excitement of wagering on horse racing is just a click away. You'll get live streaming, past performances, race replays, our virtual tote board, analysis and selections from professional handicappers, a simple, safe, and secure wagering platform, and best of all, you get track prices. CapitalOTBBet.com. Bet any place, anytime at CapitalOTBBet.com. And be sure to download our new mobile app from the iTunes Store or Google Play.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. We have a couple of minutes here before we'll take another break and connect with Steve Byk. And again, yesterday he was at Oaklawn as he continues the radio show road trip. But I thought in a couple of minutes, maybe we'll look at the jockey standings at Aqueduct, because as I look at Aqueduct this winter, there are names that are brand new, essentially, certainly on the New York scene. And I was just curious, the familiar names are up there at the top, but I was just curious as how it shook out. Technically, as far as Equibase is concerned, the meet is New Year's Day through March 26th down at Aqueduct. So these stats are going back to January 1st. And as I say, familiar names, not really surprising up at the top, but there is that sprinkling in of the newer names as you go down. Currently at Aqueduct, Manny Franco leads, but Dylan Davis is right up there. Manny Franco, 44 wins. Dylan Davis with 40. When you're looking at the PPs and you see those guys on, you can have some confidence. Jose Lezcano is sitting with 29. Eric Consell, 23. Also, Kendrick Carmouche is currently on the sidelines with 23. Speaking of on the sidelines, Trevor McCarthy, I think I read this week, is looking for a return. So wish him the best. I think he's the article I read in the Racing Forum said he'd been on some horses over the past week or so, kind of getting back in shape. But Kendrick Carmouche and, as I say, Consell tied there in fourth with 23. Jockey Gomez, Jose Gomez with 15. Jason Hueyes, as I say, a newer name, sitting with 13, so he's sitting seventh. George Vargas in eighth with 9 wins. Matty Alver, the apprentice, with 6. He's doing well. Heeman Harkey also with 6. Jackie Davis with 5, and her sister Katie with 4. They both had wins over the past couple of days. Katie had one yesterday, and Jackie had one on Friday, I'm reasonably certain. So again, some of the names a little bit less familiar than normal in New York racing, but they're sprinkled in and they're doing okay. Again, you're looking at lower numbers of winners as compared to the top of the list, but they're also getting less mounts, so their percentages aren't bad in particular. But again, the familiar names are up at the top: Manny Franco, Dylan Davis, Jose Lezcano. They're the guys who, day to day are attracting some of the better mounts, and therefore also winding up with the higher number of winners, which isn't surprising. And still, better part. I was going to say better part of a month, but the way it's worked out the past couple of years, maybe the better part of a couple of months before the big guns really come back to New York, because it seems like the last few years, they're Gulfstream, Johnny Velasquez out in Southern California, but a lot of these guys seem to spend a lot of time at Keeneland in the spring before they make their real return to New York. So some of these folks probably have, as I say, maybe the better part of a couple of months before the room starts to get some of the more familiar names back in New York. And so we'll see how it plays out before the meet officially ends on, as I say, the meet here via Equibase, going from New Year's Day to March 26th. All right, we'll take another break. When we come back, as promised earlier, we'll get some thoughts on Oaklawn from our colleague Steve Byk, on the road with the SiriusXM radio show, and he was down in Arkansas this weekend, so we'll check in with Steve right after this. Stay tuned.
What if there was a way to become a better horse player, to have a better knowledge of the game, to be more successful? What if there were a way to take what you've learned, what you know, and make better decisions, better choices? In horse racing, knowledge is a powerful tool. Race results and replays, past performances, and live streaming. Wagering from all your digital devices. Capital OTB. Become a better horse player.
This is a championship meet. All the best jockeys in the world are here, and I'm excited to ride against them.
We back.
And you get to watch some really incredible, talented athletes out there.
To us, it's a place to be in the winter.
I love Gulfstream Park because of the racing.
The palm trees, the beaches right here. The horse racing is some of the best in the country.
A lot of good horses come out of here. If you want to go to the next level, Gulfstream Park was the place to come.
I remember the first time I came to Gulfstream, it was like this big fairy tale place. All the history.
Shoemaker sitting perfectly still. He hasn't touched this magnificent colt, and here comes the finish.
And all these great horses, trainers, jockeys. It was everything that I ever dreamed of.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. As promised before the break, we have connected with Steve Byk, who, as I said earlier, on the radio road trip, the Sirius and XM, the annual early season road trip, a little Gulfstream, a little Tampa, some fairgrounds this weekend, some Oaklawn. Steve, good morning.
Seth, good morning. Good morning, Capital District.
And speaking Capital District, once again, you have timed it perfectly because we've gone through another patch of actual wintertime weather. So, although you didn't get a great weather down in Arkansas this week.
I got to Hot Springs on Tuesday evening, and it was 80-something degrees, around 84 degrees, driving from New Orleans on Tuesday, and by Wednesday evening, it was in the 30s. It was very strange, and they got rain here. It's another gray day. I'm leaving for California in about an hour and a half, but they got 3 inches of rain when the forecast called for 1/4 inch.
Oh.
So there ended up being, and it lasted a lot longer than expected. So there was no chance yesterday that track was going to get fast. If the rain had stopped, if it had stopped by Friday morning, there was a chance, but it just kept going. I mean, they have had, for those that play Oaklawn, and I'm sure they know, every time you look up on a Saturday in particular, and they're only running these Friday, Saturday, Sundays, they are going to run Thursdays in March. But every time you looked up on Saturday for a stake race, they had a wet track. I've never seen anything like it. And yesterday, what was fascinating, Seth, despite stealing the track on Thursday and having a wet track all Friday and Saturday, a variety of styles won the races. If you were good enough on the front end, you would wire. And if you needed to rally and there was pace, you could rally. I mean, just look at the Honeybee, where Wet Paint, I mean, I wouldn't have given you 10 cents for her chances on the backstretch. She had not lost touch with the field, certainly not the way Red Route 1 had lost touch with the field, and both of them come running. And Wet Paint wins by open lengths, and Red Route 1 just gets beat a length by confidence gain. So you could close on that track, but you could also win near the lead. So the racetrack was fair. The racing was fine.
Yeah, I had Nancy Holthus on yesterday, and obviously we were in the morning, and I asked about the weather, and she said, well, it's actually raining right now, so the track will be off again. But she said Friday, the wet track, things had played very fairly. So it was a fair couple of days so far down there. Before we get into the racing, you and I talked about it on the radio show, and I kind of got into it a little bit at the start of the show here. I said, for people in the audience who are kind of checking off racetracks on their list, you got to make it down to Oaklawn. And I said at the top of the show, I think Oaklawn and its relationship to Hot Springs is very similar to Saratoga and that community's relationship to the racetrack. What is your takeaway when you visit Hot Springs and Oaklawn?
Well, no doubt, and you and I have talked about it because you had been here years ago and established, a connection to the place, and you have family in Arkansas. It's a very special community, and in much the same way at Saratoga during the summer, everyone is wrapped up in the racing, and everywhere you go, all the restaurants, all the clubs, anything you do, everybody's got a racing form. And everybody is either on their way to the races or, they're going to be involved at some point on the weekends or whatever. And it's the same thing here. I mean, they are in a lot of ways maybe even more passionate about the game here because for the most part, seasonally, January, February, March has traditionally been their meet, and it really is only in the last month of the year, traditionally, that the weather would even improve to make it pleasant to go to the track. Now they've expanded. December, surprisingly, is a pretty temperate month here. January and February are the months where you get some ice and some snow and some nasty weather. But they turn out here, Seth, like you cannot believe. And I mean, even over and above the people that are coming for the casino. The casino, in fact, I took a video. I should have sent that in. I took a video walking through the casino yesterday. I mean, the place is just thronged. And, it's not just the historical horse racing. It's table games. It's craps. It's cards. They've got everything now. And they have built themselves a Vegas hotel, the Oaklawn Hotel. The racetrack continues to make improvements, new barns. The place got a beautiful facelift. There's a new sports gaming facility on the main floor, which turned out really nicely. They continue to really just upgrade the facility at every turn. And then there's the town itself, which continues to evolve and get a facelift. I discussed this with Randy Moss. If anybody wants to hear a wonderful history of Hot Springs and of Oaklawn and the Sella family, I recommend you listen to Randy Moss's visit on my show on Thursday. Randy turned up in the press box. He was visiting town. He's born and raised in Hot Springs, and he proceeded to give about an hour and 15-minute dissertation on the history of racing at Hot Springs, and it was wonderful. Then there's David Hill, the author, who's also a native, who I have on regularly. The town is on the upswing. Basically, Hot Springs of right now is where Saratoga was in the late 70s. When I first started coming to Saratoga, it was pretty threadbare. Let's not pretend that the Saratoga we have now is the Saratoga of 40 years ago, because we all can acknowledge that the town has gotten more and more upscale. But that wasn't the case 40 years ago. And that's where Hot Springs is right now. It was a big-time gaming community, illegal gaming, in the 20s, 30s. There was also the baseball. This was a place where all the teams, not all the teams, but a lot of the elite ball players would come before spring training, and they would take the water, they would take the cure, and they would get in shape, and they would play games against each other at Whittington Park and a couple of other baseball stadiums. And the town has got a wonderful self-tour, a self-guided tour that you listen to on your radio or on your phone, with all these stops talking about Honus Wagner and Babe Ruth and Christy Mathewson and all the greats, Rogers Hornsby. They all spent the winter at Hot Springs getting ready for spring training, and they also enjoyed the racing. There's a great picture that Ron Moquette put on Twitter the other day of Babe Ruth on horseback at the track. It's a really cool town. It's old. There's plenty of places that are, that need to be upgraded. It's something that I really enjoy, sort of that, that abandoned style that there's a whole photography study really of abandoned buildings, and there's quite a bit of that in the region. But there's the national park, there's the water, obviously, there's the bathhouses. There's just so much going on. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's just a wonderful trip. I'm only going to have this one trip this year. The 3 days I was here. Last year I came twice. Most years I come twice. But I just love being here.
Yeah, and I am envious. I said at the top of the show, I really enjoy Oaklawn. When I was there, the casino was there. The hotel had not yet been there. That's a good call by you, though, to kind of relate to the history, the recent history of these two towns, Saratoga and Hot Springs, because I think you're right. You go back, before SPAC and before the Northway. It was before I was going to the track, but my parents would visit occasionally and said, you didn't reserve your seat. You put a newspaper on your seat in the grandstand or the clubhouse, and that was your reserved seat. And it became totally different 60s into the 70s. And I think you're right with the improvements they're making to Oaklawn. That is changing the track and subsequently changing the town. But I highly recommend the visit down there. And Randy Moss, I'm glad you brought it up because I was going to bring it up. I saw you had the picture of him on Twitter, and I know he's a native down there. And I had an interview with him once, and he might have put on his Twitter feed. He had a little video. It wasn't video. It was obviously Super 8 film of his mother and father at the track, and he had captioned it, "My First Visit," and his mother was pregnant with Randy.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Randy's amazing. Randy told some stories. He was a local legend writing sports for the Arkansas Democrat and then the paper that eventually the Gazette, and they fought over having him on their sports department. Now the two papers are merged, the Arkansas either Democrat Gazette or Gazette Democrat. But he also, and he didn't talk about this, he also, when he was 14 years old, he was doing the handicapping in one of the newspapers. He was basically bearded. They had a sports writer because he was too young, obviously, to put his byline on it. But from the ages of 14 to 18, he was the secret handicapper under somebody else's name. He's a local legend. He was making his own figures. These days, he works for Andy Beyer. He's part of the Beyer Associates with Mark Hopkins and everybody, and what's his name in Philadelphia, Dick Girardi. But he was making his own speed figures as a kid, and so he was just an absolute legend in terms of picking winners because he had an edge that nobody else did. He's a treasure. I cannot recommend that visit. Ron Moquette was with me, as was Sandy Montgomery, who was a jock agent for years, is now a van agent for Sally Horse Fans. He's a legend himself. Really fun.
Yeah, Randy's always great, and to have him there and kind of reminiscing about the city and whatnot. I'll have to pull it up myself because I've listened to some of the shows over the past couple of weeks on the road. I haven't heard that one, though, so I'll pull it up myself. All right, let's jump in and get some thoughts on yesterday's action. We're going to take a look, work our way backwards from the Rebel. I took a little pop with Gun Pilot in here. I thought that one could be interesting. Got the price at 11-1, but Gun Pilot winds up 7th. But the betting public, no surprise, I said when I handicapped, they were on verifying the number 1 horse, goes off at 3-2, disappoints, has some traffic trouble and winds up 4th. And it does wind up to be an upset at 18-1. It's confidence game for Keith DeSormo, James Graham in the saddle. And as you said earlier, Red Route 1, the number 3 horse, makes a late run that has a threat to it. at 9-1. Reincarnate, who was the Bob Baffert horse, trained yesterday in the form by Tim Yakteen. John Velasquez on board, winds up third at 9-2, and as I say, verifying fourth. We're watching him go around the far turn here and into the backstretch. Give us your thoughts, confidence game in the upset in the Rebel.
Well, if it wasn't an upset to anybody to listen to my show, Marcus Hirsch and me and a couple other people were all over him. Keith DeSormo sends his horses when it comes to this time of year. If he's got a horse that is eligible to succeed in these races, you got to take them seriously. And all you have to do is look at those races that he came out of. He participated in nothing but live races. That LeCompte, obviously, with Instant Coffee, and then Two Phils came back and ran well. He also ran ahead of Rocket Can, who came back to be second in the Holy Bull. I mean, all he's done is face top competition, and he was absolutely a must-use. Red Route 1 is a horse. This is one of those horses that's going to hang around. Feels like a horse that from the Asmussen camp, that it fits a profile. Zaniero, I always talk about Zaniero being a late runner. He always has one of these types that is like a second-tier Derby horse who, may not be, he may not be in the top 3 or 4, by the time we get to Kentucky, but he's a horse that is going to get there. He keeps turning in honest efforts. He lost touch with the field. I was shocked how far back he was, but you could see him making his run. He tried to do, was interesting, Christian Torres, who's been riding up a storm here. Torres has been fabulous. Torres kind of made the same move that Flavian Pratt did in deep stretch on wet paint a half an hour earlier to get up. He decided to dive inside, and he made up the ground, but it did seem like Confidence Game kept going as opposed to Condensation, who was the 20-1 shot that was getting a little leg weary at deep stretch in the Honeybee. So Confidence Game stays on the last 7,500 yards, and Red Route 1's got to settle for second. You mentioned Reincarnate. Reincarnate had all kinds of experience. I actually, if you saw my tweets after the race, I got a great shot of a very animated Johnny Velasquez talking to Jack Wolf and Tim Yakteen and telling him all the things that Reincarnate was learning as the race, basically as he was trying to rally. This is a horse that has basically been on the lead in his most recent starts, and here he was having to deal with mud, having to deal with traffic. Johnny said he shied a couple of times and had to be re-engaged, and then he finished with real interest. The top 3 in this race, they're all going to go forward. They all got 90, I think a 94 buyer, for Confidence Game. So 93 for Red Route 1, probably a 90 for Reincarnate. This is going to end up being a very good race because these horses all acquitted themselves nicely. They closed into a moderate pace, fastest pace actually. The half mile was 46 flat, so there was a good pace on. This was a very good prep, but listen, for $1 million, it's supposed to be a good prep. And all 3 of these horses, I think you'll see all 3 in the Derby.
And Al Golden and Brad Cox have to be feeling pretty good that Instant Coffee gets flattered. You mentioned LeCompte. Instant Coffee won that, and Confidence Game ran third. And also it was fun. We just put, speaking of your Twitter feed, I pulled up the picture you had of Keith DeSormo and James Graham on the horse. Always fun to see, a veteran guy like James Graham wind up on a Derby potential.
Well, this group, they had a huge group in the winner's circle that Don't Tell My Wife stable with, I think there's another 2 or 3 groups involved. And what a great job by Keith DeSormo to pick this horse out. I mean, this horse, it was a $25,000 Keeneland yearling, and out of a sister of Zenyatta. This is just a tremendous purchase, and he just does a great job. That picture was funny because I was actually taking the picture of Graham, and then when I went to go, sort of frame the picture, I saw that I had Keith in the the near foreground, and so I put it up. I thought it had a great kind of, he's a little bit out of focus, and Graham is in focus, and I thought it made for a fun picture. It was some wonderful scene in that Rebel winner's circle. James Graham, like you said, he's going to get another shot. This will clearly be his Derby horse, and he's really thought of more as a turf rider, and he rode this horse like he was a turf horse, coming from off the pace.
Yeah, and great point there about the $25,000 at the Keeneland sale with yesterday's purse. They're upwards of around $800,000. That is some nice buy at the auction. All right, let's go one race earlier. The Honeybee, you've kind of alluded to it already. We're going to watch number 7, Wet Paint, get it done for Brad Cox. Went off as the 8-5 favorite. Condensation, the 5, runs second at 21-1. I like Grand Love. Grand Love, the number 3 horse, runs third in here. But again, the favorite wins. Wet Paint for, as I say, Brad Cox, Flavien Prat on board. 5th career start, 3rd career win after taking the Martha Washington at Oaklawn earlier in the meet. This one looks like a very, very serious 3-year-old contender on the Oaks Trail.
Let me tell you, they bet her like iron. I mean, like they'd already run the race. And, I mean, she falls out of it, not as far as Red Route 1, but, I mean, she was, here, let me see, 1.5, figure 3, 4.5, 5.5, 6.5, 7, 8. She was 10 lengths out of it, a quarter of a mile into the race. I thought, got too much to do. And boy, oh boy, she came running like Barry Sanders. It was unbelievable. Very nice performance. And every weekend Godolphin wins another stake, or 3. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that was, as I say, nice performance, and certainly progressing on the trail to the Oaks. And a little bit earlier on the card, the Carousel, and it looks like a potential Grade 1 start up next for the winner here, Ugiri, who gets it done by, what's the chart margin, 3.5, as the 3-2 favorite. We're going to watch the stretch run here. Number 5, Ugiri. Pretty birdie for Norm Cassie, who's having a phenomenal meet down there, runs second. Hazy Command runs third. But as I say, relatively lightly raced Rudy Brissett runner with only 7 starts going into yesterday. But the win, they say they're going to aim for the Madison at Keeneland next with Ugiri.
Yeah, this was a nice performance by Ugiri. The race strangely fell apart to some degree with all those scratches. That sort of changed the complexion of the race. I thought there was going to be, a little bit more speed to maybe soften up both of the favorites, but that's not the way it came out. Ugiri ends up, with the win. You mentioned Norm Cassie. Norm with that maiden winner for Bat Masterson earlier on the card. Grove 9-1. That was a big effort, and Norm just unconscious down there.
He's a coin flip. I didn't realize till I looked yesterday. He's over 50%. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Let's take a look because I mentioned earlier you're on the road trip, Gulfstream, Tampa, but last week Fairgrounds. So I pulled up the stretch run to the Risen Star. I like the winner. I put Angel of Empire on top. I really like Victory Formation. I just thought with the post position, I'd go with Angel of Empire on top. Victory Formation winds up disappointing as the favorite, winds up running 9th in there. But Angel of Empire for Brad Cox at 13-1, being lightly raced, comes out of the Risen Star as an interesting 3-year-old. What were your thoughts last week on the Risen Star performance?
Well, I kind of was kicking myself. That was a horse that not only had Brad visited the show on Tuesday last week and talked about Angel of Empire and how happy he was with his progress, but also Sid Fernando, who is involved with the ownership and with the Albaugh, Dennis Albaugh, and was partly involved with the purchase, and Sid talked about the horse, and I kind of blew it. I was looking else. I was kind of kicking myself at that price. But anyway, the race came back moderate speed-wise. We'll see. We'll see when everybody gets back together for the Louisiana Derby. The horse that impressed on the day actually the allowance race with Dennington and Caglioso for Cherie DeVoe. I'd be as excited about those two as I was if anything out of the Risen Star.
What about Who's Your Filly in the Rachel Alexander? Pretty mischievous. Gets that done at 8-1 and at 2-5. Who's Your Filly running third in there?
Well, that everything went wrong, obviously. From I know that everybody talks about the start. The start was, it was not a good start, but it wasn't as horrific as everybody was carrying on. Tom Amos wants to put a line through it. The hype on her was crazy, over the top, and she's got to take a step forward as a 3-year-old. So they'll point to the Fairground Oaks, and we'll see. We'll find out more. But she did not look good. At no point did she look like she was moving, like a winner. When she dragged herself into contention, she was being ridden off the turn, and then she was just all out of sync, I thought, Seth. She was swapping leads around, and she looked very uncomfortable in the stretch. This was not what they were looking for at all. So,
as I say, you're on the road trip, and I'll give you a chance to talk a little. I wasn't seeing a lot of food in Arkansas. I guess that's when you're moving from New Orleans to Arkansas. I guess the food goes down the priority list a little bit. But I will say, I laughed.
That's unfair.
I will.
That's unfair.
I will say I laughed a little bit though when I was listening to the radio show when you were down at the fairgrounds, because you were talking about meeting some of the fairgrounds guys in a restaurant. And was it Shapiro or Kilroy? One of the guys was eating a salad.
Shapiro.
And I guess the salad
that
in the po' boy places.
That was apparently on the previous trip. Scott Shapiro had gone into Leoise's, which is the racetrack, the little joint right outside the gate at Fairground, which is just a fabulous place for gumbo and po' boys. And Scott apparently, the first trip, he had ordered a salad, and so no one's going to ever let him forget it. But he did come back strong. He did get a barbecue shrimp po' boy, which is like a gigantic, enormous thing with 50 shrimp in it. Listen, the food in New Orleans is unbelievable. Hot Springs, though, is underrated. It's a fabulous pizza town, starting, of course, with the Lucas. Anthony Ballinati, who's a friend of Frank Miramatti's, and he and Frank got friendly when Frank was calling the races there. His restaurant, the Lucas, is absolutely out of this world. He does a brick oven pizza that is New York or New Haven eligible for comparison. I mean, it's that good. And there's actually 2 or 3 others. There's a place called Squeeze Box, which is a terrific pizzeria. There's Grateful Bread, which is another place, a beer garden, and they've got terrific pizza. It's a surprisingly strong pizza town, and there's other places too. You also got fun food like catfish and that kind of fare. But for New Orleans, I mean, what can you say? Crawfish season, it started, so I got to go to a crawfish boil. I go to Angelo Bricato's, 100-year-old Italian gelateria for gelato and pastry, fabulous. All the predictable places. I'm going to be back in New Orleans in a week for the HPPA convention.
Oh, wow. So wait a minute. What is the schedule? Because I said when I started the show, you were headed to California. I thought it was going to be California to Vegas, but there's a little New Orleans in between those two?
Well, yeah, the HPPA convention is next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then on Wednesday night, I'll head to Vegas to do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday at the National Horse Players Championship at Horseshoe, and then finally home for a week. But we got to go to Santa Anita. We'll be at Santa Anita Monday through Friday this week before going back to New Orleans.
Very good. So we'll be tuned in as the radio road trip continues. We appreciate the visit this morning, though, Steve. Know you're on your way, and in the midst of travel, so I appreciate you taking a little time, and we will be tuned in over the next couple of weeks as the road trip continues. Travel safe, and we'll talk again.
Seth, I appreciate it, and maybe a little Big Cap and San Felipe recap next Sunday.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Have fun, and as I say, travel safe.
Thanks. I got to say hi to my wife, who's holding down the fort. Honey, I'll be home soon. Don't change the lock. love my Derby Barbie. She's getting a little testy, Seth.
Wow. So, as they say, we've had a little winter weather here. There's been a little snow, so she's out doing the shoveling.
No, she's got a snow blower. She doesn't need to shovel.
Does that make it better? Come on.
Very thoughtful that way.
All right. Steve,
hey now. Steve, everybody.
Take it easy. Steve Byk, again, Sirius and XM's at the races. You can check that out. You can pull it up online as well, or plug it in on Sirius and XM. And he'll be certainly recapping some of this action as well over the next couple of days on the radio show. Headed out to Southern California, then back to New Orleans. Then, as I said earlier in the show, I'm envious. Headed out to Vegas again for the National Handicapping Championship. I came like that close 2 weeks ago in one of the contests to getting out there as a player, which is my goal. I wound up $8 short as a second in a contest where the winner went to Vegas. I wound up $8 short, and the person who beat me didn't have anything in the last race. I won the last race, and this person that beat me had a place horse in the race before that was $8 and change. If he or she, I don't remember, didn't have that place horse in the next to last race, I would have won by 30 cents and been going to Vegas. So that was a little frustrating. But again, envious, always a lot of fun to listen to when Steve's out in Vegas, and regardless of where he is. And we appreciate the visit this morning. All right, I'm going to wrap things up. Let me remind you that, first of all, the syndicate yesterday wound up, it was everybody, I think, made a little bit of money. And if you're not familiar with our syndicates, they're a lot of fun. When they keep your eyes open website, and we'll mention them here on the show. We've done them regularly at Saratoga in the past. But we put a group of people together who each pitch in some money, $25, and then OTB puts in some money. And we'll pick a late pick 5 somewhere. You know, when we were doing it at Saratoga, it was always at Saratoga. Yesterday it was at Gulfstream. And the syndicate members put in their 25, all the money's pooled together. They each put in 25, all the money's pooled together with OTB putting in some money. And then the syndicate members give pick 5 selections. And we here in the marketing department will look and use those selections to put a ticket together. And it was a fun ticket yesterday that played out a little logically early, but there was enough in there that in the last race, Carl Spackler, who just went off as a huge favorite, won, and that was on the ticket. And so, as they say, everybody wound up to make a little bit of money off of that. But there were 4 deep in the last leg. The other 3 horses were all paying great and were logical horses. So you got into that last race kind of really having a little bit of rooting interest. And unfortunately, just a huge, overwhelming favorite won the last race. But it was fun. And as I say, really walked away with a little bit of a profit. So keep your eyes open for those syndicates in the future. But coming up this weekend, it'll be a Brooklyn Cowboy bankroll on Fountain of Youth Day down at Gulfstream. And again, they pulled the card, and the Fountain of Youth itself just looks phenomenal. But Kevin Cox of the Brooklyn Cowboys is going to have $250 to play on behalf of the team. But you can put your name in the hat. That opened yesterday and will be open until Thursday at noon. To put your name in the hat to potentially get selected on the team, go to capitalotb.com, click on the promotions link, and then look for the Brooklyn Cowboy graphic. You click on that, there's a little entry form there. So you can, as I say, put your name in the hat to potentially get on next Saturday's bankroll team and maybe win a little extra. And Kevin Cox has been doing great. Pegasus Day, knocked it out of the park with the triple in the Pegasus itself. Got everybody a nice chunk of dough. And then a week or two later, he also had a bankroll that made everybody a little bit of money as well. Nice chunk of money If you'd like to take your shot getting on the bankroll team for next Saturday, again, Capital OT, top of the page, click on that promotions link and look for the Brooklyn Cowboy bankroll graphic and click on that. All right, I'm late, but what else is new? I'm going to wrap it up here, though, for a Sunday morning. Racing across America. Seth Merrow in the studio. We will be back a little bit later on, as usual, with OTB Live on a Sunday afternoon. I have some Aqueduct, some Gulfstream. We'll look at some Oaklawn as well, and hopefully having a fun afternoon cashing tickets. That's always the game plan, and we'll see if we can do it today. Once again, really appreciate your tuning in, as always. So Seth Merrow in the studio, wrapping up Racing Across America on this Sunday morning, but I invite you to come back a little bit later on for Sunday afternoon's OTB Live. We'll see you then. We'd like to thank Gulfstream Park for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB throughout the championship meet. The Gulfstream Park Championship meet runs now through the early April Florida Derby weekend, featuring high-quality racing throughout. Once again, we'd like to thank Gulfstream Park for their sponsorship.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off-Track Betting.